Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Tuesday, but on a Wednesday. um, I'm sorry that this is a little late. I was battling a migraine all day yesterday and just couldn't record it. Before I get started, I want to remind you guys of a couple of things. One, I have my Instagram and Twitter linked in the description below if you guys want to follow me on there. I don't really, like, my Instagram is my personal one. I don't use Instagram that much. So not too interesting. I try to be fairly active on Twitter, but not always either. So, but they're there in case you want to follow me on there. I also have a Patreon where, depending on the tiers, I offer one or two solved true crime cases each month. So that is also there. And I will also add a PayPal for like a little tip jar, like a lot of ASMR artists do. I didn't want to use PayPal at first because last year they were closing down a lot of ASMR artists' accounts, like without warning, just like closed down, not giving them their money for like no reason. But I think that's solved now, and I know a lot of you have said they can't donate monthly, but they would like to contribute to my channel, so I will have it up soon and link it down below always. But I want to stress that it is not an obligation, okay? I know a lot of people hate this kind of stuff, and I get that. So it's completely voluntary. I appreciate all of you regardless. I love that you're all here. I want to point that out. So without further ado, let's talk some true crime. Today's case is one that I watched a video on probably like 2 years ago. And it's a case that has always stuck with me. I regularly think about it, and I regularly go back to it because I find it really creepy. And it's definitely caused me to be a little bit more cautious and think, well, maybe I won't do that in the future. So, yeah, let's just start. So, today I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of Amy Bradley. I'm just going to move my notes a little bit closer to me. So Amy was 23 years old when she went missing on March 24th of 1998. Some reports say 23rd, but I believe it was the early morning of March 24th. So in 1998, Ron Bradley, Amy's father, had won a cruise at his work. And it was meant to be for just him and his wife, Iva, but they decided to take their 2 children with them. So Ron's work paid for their trip, and then they paid for their children's trip. They had 2 kids, Amy and Brad. Yes, I know there's going to be comments about that. Keep them respectful, but I know there's a lot of comments about his name being Brad Bradley, but you hear that a lot. So, Amy graduated from university 2 years prior in 1996. She was actually a pro, I guess you could say, basketball player. She got a scholarship to play basketball at that university, and in fact, she was the first person ever to get a full scholarship for basketball to that university. And she was extremely close to her younger brother. They had a great relationship. They cared for each other a lot. So on March 21st, 1998, they got on a plane to Puerto Rico to board the Rhapsody of the Seas, which is a ship owned by Royal Caribbean, for a 1-week cruise to Aruba in the Antilles. Amy was not a great traveler. She was generally kind of afraid of boats and of planes. She just didn't travel a lot. So their first stop was Aruba. Now they all got off the boat. They did some shopping, went sightseeing, had a great day together on the island. And they went back to the boat. They had dinner together. And they just had generally a great time. Now after dinner, Ron and Iva went off to meet up with some work colleagues of Ron's because it was, after all, still a work trip. I wasn't like he was working on this trip, but it was a trip that was given to him from work, and some other colleagues had also gotten it. So he, met up with those colleagues. They had noticed that a waiter that night was showing some unusual interest in Amy. He had asked her mother, I believe, to ask Amy if she wanted to go to a nightclub with him at night in Aruba. But when Amy got the message, she declined. Instead, she and her brother changed into some outfits and went to explore the ship together and went to the casino to do some gambling. They met up again later with their parents, and they all decided to go to the disco on the ship together to attend a limbo. Yeah, limbo, that's what it's called, right? A limbo contest. Funnily enough, Brad actually won that contest. Then Ron and Iva went back to their rooms to sleep, but Amy and Brad decided to stay a while longer. They were playing music. It was disco, it was a party all night. So Amy, she got to talking to the bass player, a guy that they called Yellow. His real name was Alistair Douglas, but for the sake of this case, I'm just going to refer to him as Yellow because that was his nickname that everyone used. So she spent pretty much the entire night talking to him, dancing with him, having fun with him. There are actually a lot of videos online that show the two of them either dancing together or talking together. It just shows that they were both having fun. Now at 2:45 a.m. Ron woke up and noticed that neither of his children were in their beds, so he went to the disco to check on them. He saw that Brad was talking to a girl and that Amy was dancing with the bass player. So he went back to bed. Around 3:45 a.m., Brad went back to the room and Amy followed 15 minutes later. Ron remembers seeing Amy in the bathroom and asked her to turn off the light. She then went out onto the balcony with Brad. They smoked a cigarette together. According to Brad, they had a great conversation. They were having fun. They laughed a lot. They talked about jet skiing the next day in Curacao, something they were really looking forward to. And then he eventually went in to go to bed, and Amy said that she would stay out just a little bit longer and follow him shortly. And that was the last time Brad saw her. At 5:30 a.m., Ron woke up and he saw Amy lying on the balcony. At least he saw her legs. He said that they were getting up in about an hour anyway, and he assumed that she had just fallen asleep out there, so he just left it alone. They were getting up early to go explore Curacao, so there was no point. He woke up again at 6 a.m., just 30 minutes later, and Amy was gone. Her cigarettes and her lighter were also gone. Presumably she took them with her, but her shoes were still out on the balcony. Just to let you know, it was a private balcony. I think most of you know what that looks like. It's a cruise ship. Some rooms have a private balcony. No one else could access it, just the people that were in the room. Now, Ron didn't... Well, at first, he immediately looked for a note, as Amy was known to leave notes, but he couldn't find one. He didn't immediately worry because he thought, well, we have to get up early anyway to leave. Amy might just have gotten up before all of us and decided to go look at the sunrise. And he went out and searched the entire ship front to back, but he couldn't find her anywhere. And this is when he panicked, so he went back to the room and woke up Iva and Brad to say that he couldn't find Amy anywhere and that she was gone. 30 minutes before she went missing, so around 5:30 a.m. when he last saw her, the boat had actually docked in Curacao, and at this time, when he went to alert the captain, so around 6, well, he searched for an hour, so around 7 a.m., people were lining up to leave the ship to go explore Curacao. So he went went straight to the captain and begged him not to let anyone off the boat. Their reasoning obviously was that if someone took her, she would still be on the boat because there was no way else to get off. And he wanted them to search the boat with everyone still on it. But the captain declined. He said that he didn't want to alarm people. They asked him to at least make an announcement that Amy was missing, but he didn't want to do that either because, again, he didn't want to alarm people. So he said that he had to let people off the boat and pretend that everything was okay. He would tell his crew to go to search the ship for her. He did agree to a search, and he made an announcement to ask Amy Bradley to please report to the purser's desk, and that's all he did. At some point, something super strange happened. Yellow, the bass player from the Blue Orchid band, came up to Brad and said, "Sorry to hear about what happened to your sister," which was really odd because at that point, only the security team and the family knew that Amy was missing. This was before the announcement was even made that paged Amy, so it's very strange that he knew something had happened to her. So the doors of the ship opened and people left to visit Curacao. The Bradleys at this point panicked because that was around 3,000 people potentially getting off the boat. There were 3,000 people thereabouts on board, so obviously not everyone would have gotten off the boat, but the majority would have. If someone was trying to take Amy off the boat, like under duress, that wouldn't have been noticed in such a huge crowd of people. And they didn't know anymore whether to search the boat or go to Curacao. Like, they just didn't know what to do. Two girls came forward later that day and said that around 5:30 a.m. they saw Amy walking towards the disco with Yellow. However, the crew said that they searched every inch of the ship and that she was nowhere to be found. At this point, it was nearing the end of the day, and the captain told the family, "Look, you have a choice to make. You can either stay in Curacao, or you can leave with us, but with or without you, this ship is leaving tonight. And if you're on it, you can't get back to Curacao for at least a few days, like until they docked at another island, and then they'd have to fly back if they wanted to." So our family decided that they were going to stay behind in Curacao. They checked into a hotel there, and they started calling family members back home to let them know what had happened, and they also called the U.S. Embassy. So at 6 a.m. the next morning, Curacao police started their search for Amy. They used helicopters, they used a plane, they used multiple ships to search the water, but they didn't find anything. And eventually the FBI got involved. When the FBI looked into it, they found that the crew had not searched the entire ship. They had only searched the common areas. Not every nook and cranny like they said they did. Her family was obviously livid when they heard this because they based their decision on staying behind in Curacao on the fact that the ship had been searched, that every nook and cranny had been searched, and Amy wasn't there. Because my initial thought was, okay, I can think rationally about this. I may not think that way in that moment, but my initial thought was, why don't you have one or two people stay in Curacao and one person stay on the ship? That way you've covered both areas. But they were told that every part of the ship had been searched and that she wasn't there, so that's why they decided to stay in Curacao. And evidently that was not true. So the FBI went in and searched every inch of the ship themselves, but at this point Amy had been missing for days. They also made the captain make an announcement about this. They gave pictures to every crew member and told them they had to search it, to show it to all the passengers. They also decided to interview Yellow since he was last seen with her, and he made that comment to Brad. So he agreed to take a polygraph test and passed like with flying colors. But he did change his story completely. He said that he never made that comment to Brad and that he had no idea where Amy was or what even happened to her. They then also asked to look at Amy's photos. So I'm sure you've seen this. If you go to a theme park, there's professional photographers there who take photos of you. And you get either a card or a number. And obviously they hope that at the end of the day you buy them. It's the same on this ship. There were people taking photographs and they were all numbered per guest. Like each guest had a number. And you could give your number and go look at your photos. The FBI asked for Amy's photos and all her photos were missing. In fact, she was the only guest from whom all the photos were missing, which is super sketchy. So that's when her family started wondering if this boat wasn't being used for sex trafficking and if the entire crew was involved in a cover-up. On March 28th, the family went back home. The cruise was over at this point, so there was no point in them staying anymore because they couldn't. There was nobody left on the boat. The cruise had ended. When they got home, they launched a national TV campaign to look for Amy. And a few days later, they were contacted by a Spanish-speaking taxi driver who claimed that when the ship docked back in Puerto Rico, he saw Amy being taken off the ship and pushed into a taxi. If this report is true, it means that Amy would have been on the ship the entire time, like 4 days after she went missing, and that the fact that they didn't search the entire ship meant that Amy was still on it. I know the FBI said they searched every part of the ship, but, there could have been places that they missed. They gave this lead to the FBI hoping that they would investigate, but they found out 8 months later that the FBI didn't do anything with this lead. A Canadian scuba diver also came forward and said that he and his team were clearing their gear on the beach one day when he saw a woman walking towards him, followed closely by 2 men. When the woman heard that this man spoke English, she started walking much faster straight towards him, and just as she was about to open her mouth, the 2 men grabbed her by the arm and led her into a nearby bar. So the scuba diver obviously thought this was really suspicious and followed them to find out what was going on. And he distinctly said that he saw a scar on her right ankle and a Tasmanian devil tattoo on her left shoulder, both things that Amy had. So her parents thought this was a super credible witness. But again, the FBI, I don't think, followed up on it. The family just felt that they weren't getting enough help from the FBI, so they hired a private special forces guy. But unfortunately, this guy turned out to be a fake. He kept asking them for money, and Ron's boss was paying for all of it. He went to Puerto Rico, said that he located Amy, or who he thought to be Amy, and he sent them numerous pictures of a woman who dressed similarly to Amy, and he showed her pictures of all her tattoos. She had a Chinese tattoo also on her right ankle, the Tasmanian devil tattoo, like this woman had all of it. So her parents were convinced that it was Amy, and he told them that he was ready to go in and extract her, but he needed $100,000, which Ron's boss at this point was like, look, I'm more than happy to pay this guy if it brings your daughter back, but I want someone to go and investigate what exactly this guy is on to. So he sent a guy over to Puerto Rico and found that all he was doing was drinking and living the high life on their dime. He had paid a woman to dress like Amy and put true tattoos on her in the exact places that Amy had to convince the family that he was onto her. He got convicted for this, by the way. I believe he was sentenced to jail for a few years. I mean, how sick of a person do you have to be when this family is in such deep misery, to take money out of it and pretend that you're going to save their daughter. Oh my god, I was so pissed when I heard that. A few more sightings. 2 years later, a naval officer claimed that he saw Amy in a brothel. She told him that her name was Amy Bradley. But he didn't come forward until 2 years later, actually. So I don't know exactly when the sighting was. I think it might have been shortly after she disappeared, but he didn't come forward until 2 years later. So when police went and looked into it, the brothel had burned down in the meantime. There is also an escort website where pictures were found that looked a lot like Amy, but Amy's mother said that it looked like Amy, but like a different version of her, like a much more hardened version, and someone who had obviously been through a lot. The website was taken down shortly after, but again, police believe that based on the facial structure, it is Amy, but they can't confirm it, obviously. Again, her mother thinks it is her, but a different version of her, so I don't know how certain you can be. Someone said, why didn't the FBI just order her, book her through the website, and then if they found out it was her, they could extract her? And I find that a very interesting point. I mean, someone said they couldn't trace the website because it was heavily encrypted. And that may be, but I agree. Why didn't someone go undercover and try to book her? But they didn't. A few more sightings happened. A woman said that she was in a bathroom like 10 years later on a cruise in Barbados, in a public bathroom, and that a woman came in with a man, and the man was yelling at her like, this is my deal and you have to go through with this and don't ruin my deal. And when the man left, she spoke to the lady and she said her name was Amy, not Amy Bradley, just Amy. And that she was trying to get some information out of her, but at that moment 3 men came in and escorted her out, Amy, and that she never saw her after that. So that is really it. She's been missing since 98, which is at this point 21 years ago. I mean, there are some theories that say maybe she fell overboard, or maybe she jumped overboard and tried to commit suicide. Her family strongly don't believe this. She was a very happy person. She was starting a new job right after she came back from the cruise, which she was really excited about. She had just bought a puppy, and she was terrified of the ocean. She was actually a trained lifeguard, which I don't think means much in the ocean. I don't think it means that you can save yourself because, it's treacherous water. But I think that might be why she was afraid of the ocean, because she knew how treacherous that water was. And her mom said she stayed away from the railings of the ship. She was so terrified of the ocean that she made sure she wasn't anywhere close to the edge of the ship. So she said, falling in on her own, she wouldn't have gone near the edge, and jumping in, there's no way she would have chosen to do it that way. I think the most believed theory, the one that I think is the most obvious, is that she was pulled into sex trafficking. She was spotted by so many people on the Antilles Islands. That is, of course, if all these spottings are true. We don't know that for sure. They sound credible, at least some of them. But then begs the bigger question, who did it? I mean, you would obviously assume that this guy Yellow was involved. He seems super sketchy. He was the last person that was seen with her. She spent all night talking to him, which kind of would make her a very easy victim for him, I guess. But he obviously wouldn't have done it alone. There would have been several crew members involved, you would think, if they were able to hide her for that long. I mean, if these sightings are true, it means she was on the ship the entire time, kept captive somewhere. And the fact that all her photos were missing, that obviously someone deleted them. So I would imagine that at least some of the crew members were involved. And if that is the case, then I am never taking a Royal Caribbean cruise. Like, I don't want to put them on the spot. Her parents actually sued them years later for negligence. I'm not saying that this happens specifically with them, but I've always been interested in taking a cruise by myself, and I am seriously rethinking that. I don't think I would, and especially not with them, because if you get to talking to, say, a bartender and he finds out you're out alone, like, who's to say what would happen? She wasn't alone and still disappeared. What I personally think happened is that the bartender like asked her to meet up with him early in the morning, maybe to go look at the sunset or to go for a walk, before she, got off the boat to explore Curacao with her family. And that's why she was seen walking with him at 5:30 in the morning, but he then ended up doing something to her. I wonder if after 20 years she is still involved in that and still being held captive. I don't know. I just find this case really creepy, to think that something like that could happen on a cruise ship that is very well known, with 3,000 people around, and she just vanished. And again, if all these sightings are true, was kept captive on that ship for that long. I just find that so creepy to think about. So that was all for this case. Let me know what you guys think. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.